Hello, everybody. I'm glad that you're here to join me today. My name is Nancy, and I have something to show you. I want you to tell me if you can identify what this might be. You see? It's something what we're going to be talking about today. I'll give you a hint. You know now? What's that look like? Is that a turtle? So turtles can hide in their shells like this, or when they're not scared, they can come out like this. They don't usually wave, but mine does. All right, we're going to be talking about turtles today. I'm going to start out with a turtle poem. The turtle's always been inclined to live within its shell, but why he cares to be confined, the turtle does not tell. The turtle's always satisfied to slowly creep and crawl, and never wanders far outside his living room or hall. So if you wish to visit him in his domestic dome, just knock politely on his shell. You'll find the turtle home. So we'll do a little bit of trivia on the turtle, and then I have a story to read you on Lonesome George. So like frogs and toads, kids can't seem to resist the temptation to befriend a turtle, especially the benign and seemingly helpless painted ones. Once spotted, even the youngest toddler can catch these slowpokes. But lo, the snapping turtle. Its menacing look is enough to make you crawl into your shell, if you had one. Turtles are reptiles and true senior citizens in terms of how long they've been around. They were here when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. In fact, they've been on Earth for over 200 million years. Today, many of the remaining species of turtles are considered to be endangered. While most reptiles call the tropic their homes, turtles are most abundant in southeastern North America and southeastern Asia. Many different types of turtles live in a variety of environments. You can find them in lakes and rivers, salt marshes, ponds, and even deserts. They're big, they're small, and in between. For example, the lowly mud turtle grows no larger than 4 inches long, while a loggerhead, weighing in at over 1,000 pounds, would crush your foot if it stepped on you. Needless to say, don't bring this one home as a pet. And of course, there are many mid-range turtles, like the alligator snapper, which weighs about 100 pounds. Can you remember when pet turtles were sold in the store? They had pet shops that sold turtles. All the kids had to have them. However, these days, it's illegal to sell them that way. The ban on turtles as pets is attributed to the fact that they can breed the bacteria that results in salmonella. And as we know, kids like to put anything and everything in their mouths. One of the most distinctive features of the turtle is its shell. The upper arch part of the shell is called a carapace. The flat bottom is the plastron. Most turtles can pull their arms and legs and paws into these protective shells. For some reason, the snapper turtle doesn't have a shell it can fit its head and legs inside. Instead, for its defense, it has the ability to snap real hard with its beak to keep enemies at bay, which seems to work in most cases. The snapper also has a long tail, which helps in identification before it starts snapping. Turtles have excellent vision and a sense of smell, but they do not hear airborne sounds as well as we do because of their lack of an outer ear. They also have beaks rather than teeth that they use to tear their food. Most turtles live on dead plant and animal matter, while some prefer seafood, going after clams and mussels. Turtles store food in the form of fat and can even bring along some extra water, which they store in their specialized bladders. Perhaps it may come to a surprise to you that turtles can't breathe underwater, yet many like to hang out at the beach. They do so because much of their food source is near open bodies of water. Turtles don't lay their eggs in the water, but rather near the water, where they often bury them underground. The degree of heat during this incubation period will determine the gender of the turtle. Higher temps usually produce females, while the males like it cool. So here's a couple trivia questions, turtle trivia questions. Is a turtle and a tortoise the same thing? What do you think? Technically, yes. However, some distinction between the two is in order. Most scientists agree that tortoises are strictly land-loving creatures with a high-domed shaped shell. Turtles are generally found around ponds, rivers, lakes, and oceans. So now here's the next trivia question. What do you call a group of turtles? No, not a slow-moving convoy. Some folks refer to a group of turtles as a herd, while the classic definition is a bale of turtles, like a bale of straw, but it's a bale of turtles. Number 3, do turtles have teeth? What do you think? No, not even the infamous snapper turtle, but they do have a sharp beak that you would not want to come chomping down on your foot. Question number 4, how big can a turtle get? And I gave you a hint earlier in my reading. Well, let's just say you wouldn't want this one to sit on you. A male Galapagos tortoise from Isles Santa Cruz, raised in captivity at the Life Fellowship Bird Sanctuary in Florida, may just be the heavyweight champion of the world. In 1996, it weighed 882 pounds. And that's one we're going to be reading about in just a minute. Here's another question. How long does a turtle live? Some live to be 30 years old. How long can a turtle go without food? You got a guess? Some can go as long as a year. Number 7, what is the hard plate beneath the turtle called? It's called a plastron. It's strong like the upper shell and is part of a turtle's defense against enemies. Number 8, how can you tell male and female turtles apart? You can tell female and male turtles apart by the sound they make. Males grunt and females hiss. Number 9, could the tortoise really have beaten the hare? Remember the tortoise and the hare? Some land turtles are actually fast enough to outrun humans. And I hope it's not that snapping turtle, because that would be scary. And then the 10th one, where can you find turtles? You can find turtles on every continent in the world except for Antarctica. Now we're going to read a story called Oh, Lonesome George. And we're going to talk about, these are from the map of Galapagos Islands with Pinta Islands in the northwest. So I'm just going to kind of give you just a little idea there of the geography. And that's in Ecuador. So here we go. This is called A Tortoise to Remember. Charles Darwin, at the age of 20, journeyed to the Galapagos Islands on the HMS Beagle in 1831. The islands, located in the Pacific Ocean, about 620 miles from Ecuador, afforded him a look at birds, plants, and animals seen nowhere else in the world. It is believed these species first arrived by flying, swimming, or floating to the islands, because large animals at the top of the food chain were usually unable to make the long journey. The ones that did were without significant predators and flourished. The giant tortoise became the dominant creatures of the islands. Largely based on his observations and findings in the Galapagos Islands, Darwin's theory of evolution was published some 30 years later. Lonesome George was the last surviving member of the subspecies Chelonotus nigra abingdoni, and it was discovered on Pinta Islands in the Galapagos in 1972. He was taken to the Charles Darwin Research Station on Santa Cruz Island, where he remained in captivity for the next 40 years. His relatives had been hunted to the brink of extinction for food and oil by 19th century sea hunters. Giant tortoises could easily be stored on board ships and kept alive for months without food or water. This made them a popular and economical source of fresh meat. Island goats, which were escapees from ships traveling to other islands, they did their part in destroying the tortoise's habitat and contributing to their demise. To conserve the natural habitat, most of the feral goat population has now been removed. It was hoped that the 200-pound, 5-foot-long tortoise, affectionately named Lonesome George, would mate with a female Galapagos giant tortoise from a closely related subspecies. However, all matchmaking efforts failed, and for the most part, George was just not interested. Questions about his sexual orientation even arose. It was reported that George became enamored with a wartime helmet of the late Lord Devon. The helmet, which apparently resembled the shell of a young tortoise, proved irresistible to him. The Ecuadorian government even offered a $10,000 reward to anyone who could find this lonesome guy a suitable mate. Just when almost all hope was lost, George unexpectedly mated with one of the two companions that had been provided for him. Two clutches of eggs were retrieved and incubated, but sadly none hatched because they were found to be unfertilized. On the morning of June 24, 2012, his long-term keeper, Fausto Lanera, found George lying lifeless near his waterhole. The 72-year-old ranger had been part of the team that first discovered George on Pinta Island, and they brought him back to the research center. George came to recognize and respond to Fausto when he saw him by walking toward him with his neck outstretched and his mouth open as if in greeting him. At the time of his death, George was believed to be around 100, though he could have been much older or younger. George wasn't telling. Tortoises can live 200 years or more, so he may have been in the prime of his life when he died. With the passing of Lonesome George, all is not lost. Scientists recently discovered at Wolf Volcano on the Galapagos Island near Isabella a first-generation hybrid of Pinta giant and Isabella tortoises. That means that 50% of Lonesome George subspecies genetics, they still exist. In 1960, out of the original 14 tortoise subspecies originally found on the Galapagos Islands, only 11, now 10 with the passing of George, remain. And many of those were on the brink of extinction. Today, the number of giant tortoises on the islands has increased from several thousand to about 20,000. Good news for tortoise fans everywhere. Though Lonesome George is by no means the first or unfortunately the last animal to become extinct in our lifetime, for many his loss is a personal one. Now I have a few pictures of him. This first one is Fausto Larena with Lonesome George at the breeding center where he remained for 40 years. And look how big he is compared to Fausto. Here's another one. This is Lonesome George feeding at the breeding center. He's quite a big guy. Now this one is actually a taxidermied Lonesome George, and this is exhibited at the American Museum of Natural History. This is December of 2014. Look what a grand tortoise he is. Isn't that amazing? Look how big he is compared to the people. Now here's one of Lonesome George walking. And then here's one, Lonesome George at the Charles Darwin Research Center. It looks like he's bathing in the water there. So I'm going to just read a little bit of trivia about Lonesome George. Lonesome George was named in the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's rarest animal. George was named after the comedian George Gobel, who nicknamed himself Lonesome George. This quote was published in an open letter by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. More than just a symbol for the Galapagos, Lonesome George was a symbol of our global, never-ending struggle to preserve the richness and diversity and beauty of the planet we inherited. Joe Flanagan, head veterinarian of the Houston Zoo and a friend of George's for 20 years, he's reported to have said, "He," meaning George, "represents what we wanted to preserve forever. When he looked at you, you saw time in his eyes." George was noted to be a creature of habit. He was established routines and preferences. He chose to avoid most people, but did make an exception for Fausto, his keeper, and some of the other workers at the center. The likeness of Lonesome George has been featured on Ecuador's banknotes and stamps. Lonesome George became an unwitting celebrity and a popular tourist attraction with some 180,000 visitors annually. Although Lonesome George will be missed, his legacy will live on. George has been embalmed and will be kept on display for future generations to see. And that was the one picture that I just showed you. I'm going to show you again because it's magnificent. So he is embalmed and will be forever shown to future generations. Although Lonesome George, an autopsy performed on Lonesome George revealed that he died of natural causes and most likely from old age. So that's a pretty fascinating story. I enjoyed doing some research and learning about George. Now, what I found out is our very own Toledo Zoo has a very majestic older tortoise, and this actually came, so this tortoise's name is Emerson, and he actually came in 2014, August 2014. So he's been there 6 years. So this is a picture of Emerson, and I'm just going to read a little bit about him for you. Emerson weighs 440 pounds, and he's old enough to be considered a living antique, and hails from a volcanic archipelago near the equator, revered for its unique and diverse ecosystems. Emerson, a dome-shelled Galapagos tortoise, like George, estimated to be about 100 years old, arrived at the Toledo Zoo, and it was August of 2014, and he came on a FedEx flight to Detroit before coming to Toledo, Ohio, and he was uncrated inside a heated shed dubbed the Tortabode for the night. They say he's a spectacular animal, and he's a very majestic statesman tortoise. Emerson arrived at the zoo about 8:30, created by a crowd of staff members. He emerged from his yellow wooden transport crate with no hesitation and explored his new surroundings. Handlers rewarded him with carrot and sweet potato treats and a neck rub. So later in 2014, the zoo was also supposed to receive 3 2-year-old Galapagos tortoises from Gladys Porter Zoo in Brownsville, Texas. And they didn't have names as of this publication, but I'm sure they have names now. And they had to be in a 60-day quarantine period before going on display. So they are in the reptile house. The young tortoises won't be breeding age until they're about 20 or 25 years old, but the zoo plans to participate in a breeding program with them. The little ones could be here for 150 years or more. So no one yet knows the average lifespan of the Galapagos tortoise because they live so long. Tracking the animals with known hatching dates takes several generations of humans, but experts estimate the giant reptiles may live anywhere from 150 to 200 years, so much older than us. Let's see if there's anything else. Emerson was born in the wild on Galapagos Islands before he was brought to the United States, so his age and history are only a guess. Conflicting genetic tests to determine his subspecies indicate he's either a natural hybrid of tortoises from the Wolf and Alcedo volcanoes, or Isabella Island, or is from Santiago Island. And they say he is unique genetically. There is nothing in the United States similar. So take some time if you get a chance and go to the Toledo Zoo and check out Emerson. He is supposed to be one of Ohio's top tortoises. And I haven't been to the zoo yet. If you want to go on Mondays, it's free for Lucas County residents. So I would advise you to get online and see the hours of the zoo and go see this very wonderful tortoise, Emerson. And I hope you enjoyed learning about these tortoises. I know that I have. Take care and have a good day.